All right, welcome everybody. We're back with one of the deepest researchers out there. He writes great articles. His wife and he put together really amazing documentaries. I will be sharing and posting their recent Royal Society H.G. Wells, Aldous Huxley documentary on the website. So you'll see the links below, and I'll also have that posted separately as its own post because it's a really great documentary. And we're going to kind of use that as our launching point today. It's called Hidden Hand Behind UFOs, Episode 2, H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds, and the Dawn of a New Age. Matthew, Ehret, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Jay. Glad to be on.
Thank you. Yeah, I know that last time, and I apologize, it's been so long since we got back to chatting. The last time you were on, everybody loved the chat. We got really deep into transhumanism. And I think you and I really vibe really well. We have a lot of commonalities in things that we've read, rabbit holes that we've gone down. You've gone down a lot of rabbit holes I haven't, so you got a lot of research and information that I don't know about. So I'm always impressed when I meet researchers that I learn from. So I'm happy to have you on and to learn from you today. So let's just kick it off with first, what inspired you guys to pick this as the topic? I'm assuming it's because of all the fake and gay alien stuff that's everywhere all over the media. But you tell me what made you guys pick this topic.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's becoming something you can't really ignore. All of the corporate media, the congressional hearings in Mexico, Washington, and Britain, you know, it's like there's so much full spectrum information regarding UFO disclosure that's being put onto us, both from official sort of mainstream media channels, but also in terms of, we could see the predictive programming galore in Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hollywood film. Everything is pushing us to think a lot about aliens while we have this historic moment of systemic meltdown happening. Our nations have been captured by unreconstructed Nazis, you know, that have taken control of NATO's paramilitary forces since the 40s. You have all of this going on, MK Ultra psyops that nobody seems to want to talk too seriously about, embedded behind the growth of the drug culture. And increasingly, instead of dealing with these real issues of systemic breakdown that could feasibly kill billions of people, unnecessary thermonuclear wars that could erase the lives of billions of people and set humanity back thousands of years, instead of talking and solving these issues, those who would normally be inclined to look at them in the first place, who would be more open to conspiracies even existing, are being deflected into being obsessed over UFO disclosure. And so right there, that's a big red alarm. I think that we're being messed with very much so. And I'd written an article, which was a chapter of my more recent 4th volume of The Clash of the Two Americas, on the Anglo-Venetian roots of the deep state. And in it, I have a chapter on the Lawrence Rockefeller operation behind UFOs.
Yes.
And disclosure. And that was sort of, I'd written this chapter a while ago, so a lot of the elements were floating around, and I was like, well, not enough people are reading the book, not enough people know that analysis. So I was like, well, with my wife, we both have been thinking about this, and we said, well, let's make this into a documentary. And then we realized the story is so big because it involves needing to go back into the ancient mystery religions and the different occult high priesthoods that have been sort of manufacturing pseudo-religious sects over the last 2,000 plus years that are trying to revive an ancient, you know, pagan priesthood of multiple deities under the form of aliens. That's part of what's behind the new technotronic religious order that they're trying to bring about. We're like, well, we have to make this a series. So now it became, we settled on about 8 or 9 episodes. The second episode is what you just saw.
Right.
Else. And so we're just going to tell a story of just what the hell is this Rockefeller Foundation machinery that was behind the War of the Worlds broadcast back in the 30s. How is this tied to the Disclosure Project that Lawrence Rockefeller also initiated after the Soviet Union was induced to melt itself down from within through an Esalen project insidiously embedded within Russia, and this manifested in the early 90s. And then why did he create then this Disclosure Project that hired Stephen Greer, that brought in the Clinton Foundation, that brought in the Clintons, Podesta.
Yeah, the Podesta start talking about aliens, then we get the Blink-182 Tom DeShlong dude talking about aliens, and yeah, it's like the oddest people, like, that make no sense in terms of credibility, right? I mean, like, what? First of all, why would we think that this dude from this ridiculous pop punk band is somehow a real insider? And I mean, it's just so obvious to me. But as you said, a lot of people don't have the discernment to notice and to see that that's a clear level of deception. I like that over at you guys' website, which is a great website, Canadian Patriot. I recommend everybody check it out. You guys did post one of the Collins brothers essays there, I think, dealing with alien stuff, correct?
Yeah.
And so the reason I bring that up is that you know, their work is really seminal in this regard too, and invoking the beyond, especially the middle section there that deals with all the alien stuff. I recently revisited a lot of that information, so it's pretty fresh in my head. First thing I would like to point out, as you noted, is that very few people, and so I'm glad to see that you noticed this. Collins Brothers noticed it as well, but you know, if we get to the documentary, very few people realize that most of what we think about in terms of aliens, it's not from necessarily ancient texts per se. I mean, there are some ancient texts that you might could say there's the idea of, like, you know, the gods visiting or whatever. I do think Chariots of the Gods is a total fraud. That guy was busted for being fraudulent. Yeah. But to make a long story short, H.G. Wells is a key seminal figure in where we get the idea of an alien. And I remember reading War of the Worlds some years back, and I noticed as I was reading that, I did a talk on Time Machine and War of the Worlds, and I remember thinking, wait a minute, War of the Worlds has basically like an evolved human as the alien. And so I started thinking, well, what if we read the propaganda and the predictive programming as kind of just the elites? The elites are seeing themselves as the advanced super high IQ aliens. It's a kind of IQ worship where the true you know, elitist, smarter than everybody else is like this massive, big, huge brain. And so they're basically not really human anymore. They've moved beyond, quote, human. And the humans are basically cattle at that stage. And so it's the scientific high priests that are the real aliens who have to, for the sake of the good of humanity, mass depopulate and create this technocracy. So I'm really glad that you noticed this angle of H.G. Wells being a key figure for many things, including going to the moon, including the atomic bomb, and this issue of aliens.
Yeah, yeah. And I noticed that you had done a nice little deep dive into C.S. Lewis's remedy, his response to this insidious thing that had been corrupting science and predictive programming as a whole through, and it's clear when you read Hideous Strength, and I mean, I really liked your presentation. It inspired my wife to also do her own deep dive and lecture series on the same topic. But people underestimate what C.S. Lewis was tapping into by targeting this early transhumanist ideology that was taking control of Western science and our idea of what the universe is, what God is, what humans are in the context of things. And that's really it. It's this Cecil Rhodes, Ruskin thing that or actually Bulwer-Lytton. I don't know if you looked at it, but Sir Edward Bulwer-Lytton actually is a more driving force in a lot of this stuff that even shapes who H.G. Wells became, who Thomas Huxley became. And I didn't realize his role until I started doing this. But Bulwer-Lytton is this high-level oligarchical. He's known as a creative writer. He was also minister of the colonies under Benjamin Disraeli. Very, very powerful figure. Born from a high-level oligarchist family, silver spoon in his mouth and then some. And he was a founder of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. He's the one who recruited like Bram Stoker.
Okay, that makes sense. I remember that. So the name, I was trying to think of the name, and we were talking earlier before the show started about Crooks from the Crooks tube, which is sort of the cathode ray at the beginning of like the TV and all that. And he was a Golden Dawn guy too.
He was working with Golden Dawn guys. I don't know if he was, but I like John Tyndall, who was part of the Huxley X Club, which is always interfacing with this Crooks operation in the Royal Society. John Tyndall and the X Club, who overlap with the Crooks operation big time, had his main assistant was a founding member of the Golden Dawn. Many of them were. And there's this weird, like, you know, rotating door, right, between the so-called British Enlightenment scientists who are trying to get control over the monopoly of what science and technology is. And usually you'll find that they're stealing discoveries and stealing tech from real scientists on the continent or internationally. And then they'll like try to repurpose it under a more controlled priesthood that will allow a limited degree of technology to go public, but the nature of what science itself is wrapped in this thick veneer of crazy occultism, which is where a lot of these guys they have no problem being like empiricist reduction scientists on the surface.
Exactly, and also occultists.
Yeah, at night they'll do their Dionysian like moon worshipping fucking frenzy, right? So it's this thing. And so all that to say, Bulwer Lytton wrote a book called The Coming Race. He was like leading the Rosicrucian revival, first with this book called Zanoni in the late 40s. He worked closely with Thomas Carlyle too, doing sort of a counter gang operation. And Zanoni is a story of a Rosicrucian, sort of an ancient order of sort of a great white brotherhood order that is trying to induce or recruit new recruits into the priesthood. And it's a story of, it's where he introduces the guardian of the threshold, you know, the idea that part of the rite of initiation into the Eleusinian mysteries is to go into the shadow domain through the help of drugs and other things that then involve you having to battle some sort of a demonic force within yourself. And if you can do it, basically meaning shedding all of your morality and all of your connections to your past, your traditions and morality, if you can do that and become an actualized individuated person, then you were initiated to the higher priest class. And if not, then you die. So there's the story Zanoni of like basically one of these spirit vampire types who are doing this. It's known as sort of a Rosicrucian revivalist text that then gives rise to Madame Blavatsky, whose mother is the main translator in Russia of all of Bulwer Lytton's works. So Blavatsky is influenced in her ideas of the Great White Brotherhood, you know, which has the Great Black Lodge and its oppositional force of this weird Manichaean dualism. That's what she's exposed to as she's a young girl, as a princess, right, within the Russian oligarchical aristocracy.
It also sounds like I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, it's fine.
It makes me think of the story that Crowley, and he pulled this from his, I'm sure, his Golden Dawn type experiences. That the story, you know, where Crowley's going to cross the abyss and he battles Choronzon, and he's come back as enlightened from crossing the abyss. That's essentially what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, and Carl Jung has his own thing too, with his own weird little, you know. Anyway, yeah. So Blavatsky ends up, you know, as we all kind of, people watching your show know this, but you know, she's brought in, she's working with this Scottish Rite Northern Branch Freemason Alcott, Henry Alcott, who sets up the Theosophists, right? But in that interim period, she's also interfacing with Giuseppe Mazzini in the 1850s, who's also helping to form her cosmological foundations. Bulwer Lytton's there the whole time, though. Bulwer Lytton is overseeing genocides in India, working for the British government. He's writing these early texts that are inspiring Thomas Huxley, that are inspiring H.G. Wells. And what H.G. Wells actually gives credence for his future transhumanist race that will eventually implicitly destroy humans and take over, from a book published by Bulwer Lytton in 1870 called The Coming Race, the Vrilya, or The Coming Race.
So this is where we get the stupid Vril mythology, is from this. Okay.
Yeah, 100%. And it's basically, you know, in short form, super advanced race of transhumans are under in the caverns deep below the earth. A couple of American explorers stumble on them, and they have this clairvoyance and telepathic power. They're run by these robots, these automata that are their servants, that are almost like humans, which is also what the oligarchy wants to make humans anyway, is they want to create a new epsilon class, like a la Brave New World. And they control them via kind of like neurochip implants, but that they're hereditarily controlling through their mind waves, their robots, through this Vrilya luminiferous ether that's supposed to exist in a subtle way. And they'll eventually, as Bulwer Lytton points out by the end of his book, they're eventually going to take over and exterminate the human race, because they are the future us. They are the Darwinianly
the more evolved. Yeah, it's like in Interstellar, right? When Matthew McConaughey touches his shoulder from the future, it's like, that was me touching me in the future. Do you know what I'm talking about? The scene in Interstellar where he like sees somebody touch him, and I think, isn't it supposed to be him in the future, outside of time and space? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and then like who are these mysterious beings that created this like wormhole that allows humans to like,
yeah,
it's like, oh, it's us
it's
in
us,
the future. And then you got this weird like video game reality, right? Or some future us time travel to the past. So again, the idea of time travel, a lot of these concepts that are baked into our culture originate through Bulwer Lytton and through H.G. Wells as early predictive programmers, the idea of the future Darwinianly more evolved aliens. And yeah, like H.G. Wells was a student of Thomas Huxley. You know, Thomas was a misanthropic, creative guy, really creative. And the oligarchy, one thing that they're bad at is generating original ideas. That's, you know, part of what happens when you're born into these castles with your fondness and privilege. And, you know, you get rigid. You know, so they need new blood sometimes to revitalize their rigidity. They're like dinosaurs that get hyper adaptive to systems that they create, and then they can't, like, you know, move beyond the system that will ultimately eat them up too, like parasites that kill their host. So they need to, they've realized over the centuries, I guess, that they got to find non-hereditary bloodline figures who can be brought in to generate those ideas that they otherwise would need. So H.G. Wells was born from, like, you know, a poor family.
Yeah, he's like lower middle, and then yeah, he's brought in, as you know, and I think you're right about that.
Yeah. And he got along really well with Thomas Huxley for that reason, because Thomas also born to a poor family, but he developed like a real deep misanthropy, and that hate for humanity was able to like create a good foundation for creative thought, but directed to the service of evil. Where he created the X Club, he managed Charles Darwin, and they really needed Darwin to be the sort of foundation stone for a new evaluation of the science of life that would justify the existence of an evil satanic empire. So, you know, H.G. Wells began his whole career, you know, early on after being tutored by Huxley as a writer for Nature magazine, still exists to this day, promoting pseudoscience like black hole crap and you know, global warming and whatever else. That's where.
Yeah, I remember reading Time Machine, and maybe 8-10 years ago, and when I wrote a big essay on that at the time, and I remember thinking. I didn't realize that Time Machine had like these environmentalist, eugenicist, depopulation, atomic weapons that, you know, cause Earth to be like radiated for millions of years or whatever. And so there's all these themes of the environmental stuff as well that you don't think about in ecology in that story, because I remember watching the movie as a kid, the old movie, and then they made that Guy Pearce remake that was not very good, but I just, you know, I didn't think about until reviewing and rereading the little book that, oh, it's actually full of all this stuff, right? It's actually got the two species of humanity, the elite and the Eloi and the Morlocks, and how they've sort of evolved into two different directions. And you know, later find out that's actually what you read in the real Royal Society elite, like Charles Galton Darwin. He's the one that talks about evolving in two different directions and so forth. So a lot of what's even in these sort of what you think are innocuous, just so classic sci-fi, the real books actually have quite a bit in them.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, and this is Darwinian, like, because part of it was, and H.G. Wells in his autobiography in 1901, I think it's called Anticipations or something, but he describes how he and Huxley were disgusted by the lethargy of the British Empire's ruling class, and how they were in a real existential crisis by the end of the 19th century because they couldn't maintain relevance in a world that was starting to feel the sense of freedom as something realizable, and nation states were starting to get control over this private financier class, over the pathways of what they would do.
I'm gonna put you on something crazy real quick. Most of these Zoomer gym bros are consuming macro-guzzling synthetic dyes and synthetic sweeteners on the daily. They don't even know it. Goofy AF. There's nothing great about that. Do not listen any further unless you are an alpha or sigma male. This is important and there could be consequences. There's a new certified sigma male pre-workout powder for sigmas only. It is guaranteed to empower you to dominate your co-workers, fire your boss, aggressively gamble, or invade a small village. Chad Mode stands out from the crowd by excluding artificial flavors, preservatives, sweeteners, and dyes. We've even avoided so-called natural flavors, which are actually not natural at all, ensuring a clean and effective formula. Experience the pure goodness of Chad mode colored with organic blue spirulina extract, organic lemon, cherry, and organic maple crystals. Forget synthetic caffeine made in a sketchy Chinese lab. Embrace the natural power of organic green coffee bean extract, which will get your mind going and pump you up to the max. Chad mode is made in America with all clean ingredients, the first clean pre-workout of its kind. Why are these people adding synthetic sweeteners to every single pre-workout when there are many studied downsides to consuming nasty fake sucralose? Each dose of Chad mode contains the kick of a cup and a half of coffee, delivering a surge of energy alongside essential vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and herbal extracts. Chad mode will allow you to fire your boss and dominate anyone who opposes you. Chad mode will make you more dominant in your daily life, so proceed with caution. It's as simple as mixing 1 or 2 scoops of our fine powder into water or juice, providing you with a delicious, energizing beverage featuring a burst of sweet organic fruit flavor. Chad mode will give you the extra edge you desperately crave. Don't miss out. Secure your supply of Chad mode on TikTok Shop with a limited time massive discount. Elevate your workouts and supercharge your days. Chad mode, not for your average gym bro zoomer who consumes synthetic blue dyes on the daily. Buy on the TikTok Shop now with a massive discount provided by TikTok for a very limited time. Buy now while this is still available, or go to chalk.com and use code in caption. Chad mode has been flying off the shelves because it's the first of its kind, certified for alpha males only. Do not buy if you are a beta. We will refund your money.
Infrastructure, technology, a lot of growth is happening. And every time that there's these types of leaps of discovery outside of the Malthusian, constraints of limits to growth, the oligarchy loses control. They got to sort of recalibrate. All of their former monopolies over resources and knowledge become less valuable because now there's like a new discovery. There's new resources that open up, new powers that humans gain access to that are not monopolized, that the oligarchy has to do a lot of work, recalibrate, try to subvert if possible, or try to repurpose it for their own and kill it later. So the empire, the British Empire was tearing apart at the seams. People were waking up to the evil of the empire's abuses in India and in the United States and Russia. You had a couple of assassinated czars that were doing a pretty good job, at least realizing the nature of this occult game. They were doing a very good job, which is why I won't even go. So,
well, I think I know where you're going with that. I agree with you on those.
Yeah. And so H.G. Wells is musing about how he had to send a message to the ruling oligarchs as well as to the masses through the time machine, that if they continue with this lethargy, they would result as the beautiful Aryan LOY stupid people above ground being eaten by the industrialist, blah, 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 dirty Morlocks of the working class evolved in a million years in the future. So it was like a message to his managers. It was very bold that he did that, but he was good. I mean, good at being bad. And he pioneered, he was given greater assignments with the Fabian Society, which was, again, reviving Earth Mother Gaia worshipping of nature.
Absolutely.
That's why he was a leading member with Annie Besant, who he worked with quite closely, actually, through this. They both of them worked with this guy who ran the Pall Mall Gazette, died on the Titanic. What's his name? Sponsor of
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Ah. No, I forgot his name all of a sudden. But anyway, they both worked for the Pall Mall Gazette, and they were both. One was a theosophist, mystic, follower of Blavatsky. The other, but they were both Fabians, and part of the Fabian ideology was to, again.
You're not talking about Beatrice and Sidney Webb. You're not talking about.
Well, they're the founders of it.
Yeah.
The guy his name will come to me. For some reason,
One of the British press people. You said Pall Mall Gazette. Is that what you said?
Yep. It'll come. It always comes back.
Okay.
Let's, for the time being, put a little question mark on his name for a second. But he was a promoter of paranormal activity, speaking of ghosts, channelers, stuff like that in the 1880s, 90s. And that was a big thing.
Yeah, there's in Anglo-American establishment, Quigley has a section where he talks about how what was in vogue amongst a lot of the Royal Society elites at that time, which again illustrates the point you made earlier. You would think that, well, they wouldn't be into that stuff because they would think it's superstition, but ironically, they were really into like mind over matter stuff, and they believed that there was a period where they thought that the Milner Fabian elites, they thought that Christian Science would be the future world religion, which is odd because that's kind of a, you know, nowadays we think of it as like this obscure thing, and basically only Val Kilmer's like the only famous Christian scientist I even know of. But their whole, yeah, I mean, as far as I know, maybe he left it. I hope he's left it, but as far as I can recall, I've only heard of like, he's like the only celebrity that I can think of that's Christian Science. But their whole idea is like mind over matter, right? So they don't believe in doctors because they think that like if you're good enough at your mind powers, you know, you can like make yourself healed. So it's all part of that pseudo occult, sort of kind of occult thing that was still popular after the Victorian era, like the mesmerism and all that. Now, and you mentioned Conan Doyle because he was in these same circles, right? I want to say he might have been a Fabian as well. I may be wrong on that, but this also overlaps with some of the people, as I'm sure you know this, but I've been revisiting this lately, and I bought that Colonel Z book that you talked about, and I haven't gotten into it yet, but I've been reading some other books on British intelligence in this period, and what it looks like is going on in terms of British intelligence too is that are you familiar with the Cambridge Apostles, right? This looks like it's actually like a Skittles homo ring of compromised people. I don't know if you've heard this, but I think and I say that because this overlaps with Wells, Bertrand Russell, so a lot of these people are also advocates of open relationships, pansexual, or not pansexual, but basically being free love. They're free love proponents way before the 1960s counterculture revolution, and many of them were bisexual and or Skittles. And I thought that
they swing in all directions. Yeah,
but that's important because at that time that was enough to compromise you, like in an espionage way. And there's some interesting evidence that looks like some of the higher figures in British intelligence, like Lord Victor, were playing both sides of Soviets and British intelligence by compromising a lot of these key. It's not, in other words, not just the Cambridge spy ring of Burgess and McLean and all these people in Philby, but there's actually quite a few people sexually compromised by these people in British intelligence.
Dude, we are on very similar wavelengths. I just started reading this book on the history of the Cambridge Apostles. It's exactly. By Richard Deacon, and it's obviously a puff piece because that's what they do, but it's useful at mapping it out a little bit. And you're right, you know, he acknowledges this author that yeah, it's a homo cult inside of Cambridge. It's
exactly.
That's what it is. And if you look at it, I mean, some of the leading grand strategists who interfaced very closely with H.G. Wells, like Bertrand Russell, was a Cambridge Apostle. He was recruited by, I think, somebody who's is more sophisticated than even Bertrand Russell, Alfred North Whitehead. It was a
Wittgenstein, Whitehead. I have a list of a bunch of other ones.
John Maynard Keynes,
Keynesian economics is also Skittles economics. I guess it's Fabian, correct, yep. And also Tennyson. I think
Alfred
Tennyson.
Lord Alfred North Tennyson. Yeah, he's a member of that. And yeah, you just brought up the Cambridge Five. I mean, 3 of the 5 were Cambridge Apostles. 3 of the 5 around Kim Philby, you know? And so for me, that was one thing I never really bought when people said, oh yeah, they were high-level British intelligence, and then they were so swayed by the ideals of Marx that they became defectors and then joined the KGB because they just were so moved by the ideals of communism. And it's exactly. Like, no, if you're a Cambridge Apostle, no, that is not what moves you. I'm quite persuaded that they were always triple agents who were always loyal to the occult high command in London and the Hellfire Club, which is always like, even the Hellfire Club. If you look at the history of that thing, it was just the entire British ruling class of the 18th century around Sir Francis Dashwood were all members of the Hellfire Club. They were openly, not openly, but it had come out that they were practicing within the caverns below the Dashwood mansion, you know, which had on its gates into the entry into the caverns, "They do what thou wilt shall be the law" in French, which Crowley picked up later as his motto for Thelema, that it was channeled to him by this weird entity, right? But the Hellfire Club never disappeared. The whole high command of Britain were members of this damn thing. And we were told, oh, it was illegalized. No, it was rebranded. It became the Phoenix Society.
Right.
That's also part of what the Invisible College idea was interfacing with.
Right.
This Phoenix Society of Rosicrucians that they gave that name will rise again. And this seems to be what gave rise to the apostles in the 1820s, around the same time that you had the Second Great Awakening, pseudo-Christian cult operation inside of the United States, you know, with the burnt over district.
Oh yeah.
The creation of the Mormons were generated by this thing. And in my research, all of these weird, like you said, later on you had the Church of Science and Jehovah's Witnesses. The Mormons are the big one, I think. They were part of they were not naturally emergent Christian movements that splintered out naturally. These were the effect of social engineers from London.
Yes. And I imagine you're very aware too that this is precisely why they have I assume it's still the case, I don't know if it's still the case, but they have purportedly the largest genealogical library, right? Because the essence of, I think, Mormonism is this sort of inner American version of this eugenics cult, where they want to track and keep record of bloodlines for eugenics reasons. It's not really about all the sort of weird Mormon stuff that goes on. That's really what it's about, and that's also why the CIA has relied on Mormons for recruits quite often.
Yeah, Aleister Crowley has a section. He loved Joseph Smith. He saw Joseph Smith as one of his Gnostic saints. He also made sure in amongst his mandatory reading list for recruits to Thelema, after he took control of the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, Bulwer Lytton's Zanoni was a mandatory reading. Joseph Smith, he was fascinated by.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and yeah, I think you're right. There was this weird infusion of bloodlines and spirituality, that your nobility is located in your hereditary bloodline. And then, well, yeah,
did you know that Mormons have? I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I just don't want to forget these points. No. Like, did you know that, like, so the Mormons have this eschatology of the they call it like the Great White Horse Prophecy. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, I think so. Is that what was used to brainwash also the natives around the ghost dancing religion?
It could be, but it's a future. Like, they think that there's going to be a future savior, that the Mormon Church will save America and the American Constitution from collapse, and that will then prove to the world Mormonism. And they see it as like an eschatological event. But they also have within this story too about Grail bloodline crap. So, yeah, which I think is all, and that goes back, as you said, to British.
I want to show off something that we're all proud of. I got a browser here. This is Jay Dyer's much vaunted, much sought after Philosophy 101. Now, he just got this page up. We are just testing it out. You guys are some of the first people in the world to see it. I want to say, for my part, it's not Philosophy 101. I think this is a mistitling. I really think of it as like Philosophy Unleashed, because a Philosophy 101 course, they give you kind of some useless information that you can't make sense of. Jay actually lays out over 12 weeks, dozens and dozens of hours put into just the presentation of this, let alone the hundreds and thousands of hours of research that it takes to have a coherent evolution and history of the origins of philosophy, the uses of philosophy, the different ways to look at it over time, and how that has been brought about to what we have today, which is almost an absence of philosophy on the objective logic and reason side, and an overabundance of woke philosophy that is irrational and is made up day by day as people are like, I think we should bring racism back, and then here's a justification, and then it gets wokeified and spread out, and then all of a sudden you have a bunch of communist, socialist ideas where you become the property in action. You need to be able to stand your own ground. It helps to have a foundation in philosophy, because it's a method to find truth. when you get down to it, philosophy is there because you love truth enough to go and learn how to find it because it's valuable. So if you're interested in things like that, there is the landing page. We'll link it up in the notes. It is a longer one, so we'll get a shorter URL for this. I'm sure Jay has a link on his page. I just wanted to show it off. Now you know it exists. You can go look for it and see why this is not your father's philosophy, right? So well done. I'm proud of everyone who helped to produce and edit the course. And of course, Jay did a flawless job in presenting the course over those 12 weeks. And he's a juggernaut. He's another guy, just like John Bush, in action all the time, doing something productive, like very little wasted time in his week. Those 168 hours of being harnessed very well.
Societies with British Israelite heresy, where the British Israelite believers believe that somehow the royal houses of Europe are descendants of Jesus and all this. It's a bunch of Gnostic mythology, the Merovingian bullcrap. It's all bullcrap, but they appropriate it to make it seem like they're the bloodline of Jesus, which is again just part of the eugenics bloodline worship. And although this sounds kind of outlandish to some ears, if you read Charles Galton Darwin's book Next Million Years, there's a whole chapter on magical bloodlines. And he talks about, let's see, apologize here. So Matthew, we lost you just for a second. Sometimes CollabCam pops in and out. So you popped out just for a second, but you're back. I was just saying that if you missed what I was saying, basically there's a whole chapter in Galton Darwin where he says that we've always believed in the superiority of certain, quote, bloodlines. And he says you can go back to Ptolemy. Ptolemy was an elite bloodline. He says that we're the real elite bloodlines. And this is where that eugenic bloodline element comes in, is that even if you divested of the occult magic stuff, which I'm not saying that they all are atheists. I think some of the elite are atheists. I think some of them do believe in the occult stuff. But they will say that, like, it is the reason that eugenics matters is this bloodline stuff, and the ancient elite bloodline stuff is just the ancient version of eugenics. And that's what I think is another commonality here. That's why Crowley has that really, the slaves will serve, and it's the right of the elite to, trample on the slaves and so forth. And that's why I would imagine he, I'm sure there's other reasons why he liked Mormonism. I think Mormonism ultimately is a kind of a sex cult. If you get deep into it, I did an interview recently with a Chiller Queen, and she had done a really deep dive on the court cases with the recent Mormon satanic cult revelations. I'm sure you probably saw that. But that, again, speaks to the inner elements of the sex cult stuff within Mormonism.
Well, that's right. And I think it's important to always, because a lot of Mormons might be even listening to the show, it's thinking, I've never been exposed to that. And I've actually spoken also some British Israelites. It's a big thing in Britain. And they're like, I've never been exposed to this idea that the crown is the hereditary heir of Jesus's illegitimate child with Mary Magdalene who lived out their days in France. I never heard of that. And it's like, it's true. You didn't hear about it because it's structured with an exoteric.
It's not for everybody to hear that. Exactly.
Yeah. You've got an inner elite of like 144, whatever it is. Like there's a specific number that has a numerological sort of Kabbalistic significance inside of the Mormons, just as you do within the Jehovah's Witness heresy as well, of like an inner core of initiates who understand why there's an Eye of Horus on the Mormon temple in Salt Lake City. Like they're allowed to know what the real meaning of these symbologies are. Whereas the majority of Mormons are kind of like, they're just good people. They read the Bible, they try to live good lives, but they're not.
Yeah, exactly.
They want to wear the funny underwear, but they're not, they're not part of the inner thing. They're not in on the joke. Same thing for so just because you're British Israeli, it doesn't mean that you believe what you just said. However, if you believe what you just said about the bloodlines of today's royals being the continuity of Jesus, and thus that's where Henry VIII was convinced that it was the right thing to do to create his own church with himself as the head of the damn church to splinter an already splintered thing even more. That's the sort of thinking that people like him were induced to believe in. And that means that you are also a British Israelite, but it's not exclusive. So the thing today is that, so it's really important. There's exoteric and esoteric doctrines in these synthetic cults, and at the inner, like, Hellfire Club level, what it appears in Bulwer Lytton and all of these inner Gnostics, they're all maintaining a Templar mythos and the Templars were just sort of themselves a created synthetic cult in the 10th or 11th century by a Benedictines, right? Under Bernard de Clairvaux, who was kind of like a Bertrand Russell of his day, who created this sort of synthetic cult to help facilitate.
No, when I was a trad cat, I was really into Bernard de Clairvaux. I've read a lot of his works, and he's very crucial, by the way, for the emerging new status of Mary in the Roman Catholic Latin West. So I'm not denigrating Mary as Orthodox. Definitely, I believe she has a preeminent role as mother of God and so forth, Theotokos. But in our view, the Roman Catholic Church, it goes crazy. And if you look at, there's a great book that came out that I think you would like. It's a purely sort of academic historical approach. It's called Christian East and the Rise of the Papacy by John Meindorf and Papadakis. And it's treating of this period that you're talking about between 1000 AD and 1453 with the fall of Constantinople. And what's fascinating is at the end of the first section, there's a really deep analysis that I've not really seen anybody else go into, which is how we got, via Bernard and some of these other people at this time, this new idea of a secret esoteric warrior monks that work directly for the papacy. And so they go deep into this. Now, remember, this is not a conspiracy text. This is a text just dealing with the history of medieval Latin theology versus Byzantine theology. And we're already getting the idea that the papacy at this time is beginning to figure out that some of these secret kind of orders can function as private armies to the papacy. And we see this explicitly when we get to Alexander and the Borgia papacy, where the private armies are public. And he basically says things like, if you don't fight my standing army, I'll excommunicate you from the church. And so, but this is where we're beginning to see what you're talking about, this rise of the, quote, Templar order. And that, when I was a traditional Catholic, I had a different viewpoint of this. I thought of this as, oh, well, the Templars were, like, they started out good, and then when they got to some point in their travels and defense of Jerusalem, they discovered some Gnostic thing, and then they became esotericists. I have a totally different view now. I think they were bad from the beginning now. But and that's what the Papadakis Meindorf book goes into. And I'm just backing you up. And the reason I say this is that this will tie into, I don't know if I assume you probably have dove deep into this, but lately I've been reading a bunch of books on Gladio, and Gladio resurrects this Templar idea via the figure of, so in the Reagan era, we have a bunch of Roman Catholics and trad cats, going back to even William Colby. But between William Colby and then up into particularly William Casey, Casey really thought that he would capitalize on this idea. And I don't know if you remember this, but he called all of his kind of secret team people Templars. So you'll notice, and he was a trad cat, Reagan era CIA director who really wanted to, utilize the Templar idea of, we're going to fight against the Soviet Empire with this Templarism. So the Templar meme keeps popping back up.
Yeah, and it's there in the Nazis too, right? Like,
oh, thank you. Exactly, the round table, exactly.
Well, so yeah, the two things, right? So you have coming out of the Ariosophists and the Arminian order of Otto von List and Lenz von Liebenfelds, right, who are inspiring the entire sort of rebranding, or at least recalibration of the Theosophist cosmology into a Nordic German set of sensibilities with a bit more of a rune worshipping Nordic thing of pagan Viking Wodinism. But part of that also is that the Thule society that emerges out of this thing has a sub branch within it of the New Templars, which Karl Kellner, who worked with Crowley, who was part of the OTO, is also an innovator of this thing. And
yeah, the Masons have a Templar, right? Masons have a Templar order, and I think the OTO and these people borrow the Templar stuff too, right?
Yeah, that's part of the Grand Arch initiation process. Yeah, that was brought in by Albert Pike, who again, Albert Pike, when he's revamping the Scottish Rite in the South, and keep in mind, he's also working with the Northern Branch, Southern Rite of Freemasonry with Henry Olcott in the North, because you have the Northern and Southern Branch, right? The Northern Branch is where you have the Carlisle Transcendentalists, the New England Transcendentalists coming in, running like William Garrison. Ralph Waldo Emerson is a leading figure within the Northern Branch. Olcott is a leading figure of the Northern Branch. And then in the Southern Branch, you have, Albert Pike and his nest of slave owner